so many. Uh,
Coming.
Feeling.
What does it say?
My name
New
is
floating
Dan. I'm
reactions.
the chair of
Reactions
the
have a new animation. Give it a try.
We're going to begin with our host, Father David Steffi, some words of welcome and prayer. Thank you.
Well, welcome to all of you at Notre Dame Center. Always has tried to support initiatives such as this. And Peter, you know, it goes back a long time. It doesn't depend on the director, but it's that spirit. It's the spirit of coming together, a spirit of communion, a spirit of love for the Holy Land, and a love together for each person, and how we all bring something special to the table because we all have our hearts that have been blessed and that have been gifted by God to share His gift that only us we can give. And so to bring people together, to bring the different faiths together, and to speak, and the topics have been wonderful. So I congratulate you and Rabbi and on the topics you've chosen. And so let us just start with a blessing. And we ask our Heavenly Father to bless each of us, to open our hearts to the message of love, which is the message that conquers evil, the message that allows each of us to always hold on to hope and to hold on to the gift that we've been given to share, to bring hope to others, and especially to this Holy Land, and doing what we can, knowing that we are not alone, and that God watches over us, protects us, strengthens us, and reminds us of our responsibility. So we ask with an open heart to learn, to grow, to listen, and to take away something that the Lord is placing into our hearts today to make this world, this place, our families, a place of more love and less evil. May His blessing come upon all of us. Amen.
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 Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you. Thank all of you. Sorry, I have some commitment with my community, but I am going to listen to this afterwards. But your presence has been important. It's always good to get us around the table. Thank you again.
It's always a treat to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening again. We are a group with a lot of new faces. So we're going to go around and let everyone not introduce yourself, but just say your name. But please say it slowly and loudly and audibly so that maybe we can even hear it and try to remember it. Okay? But before that, let me invite any Rainbow members who have specifically invited guests who are here for the first time to introduce their guests. Do we?
This is Joan Ramsden from Liverpool, who works in Interfaith Initiatives there.
Welcome. Any others? Then I will introduce Sean Hopkin from the Jerusalem Center of Brigham Young University.
So glad to be here and grateful for the invitation from Ophir. Ophir's the teachings that Israel and Judaism force at our center, and I've admired him for a long time. Grateful to be part of this. Thank you.
Introducing you, not me. Any other members have guests?
Scratch what I said from the record.
Too late.
Okay, well, and I will defer to our speaker, whom I will introduce afterwards. You're invited to say a bit more than your name, but we do not want to spend the whole evening on the circle. All right, so let's start over here. You go around.
Hey, I'm Marge Seduni, a Sister of Zion, and the director of the Sisters of Zion Center for Biblical Formation at Etchi Homo.
I'm Ty Cleveland, live in Jerusalem, big fan of the Rainbow Club.
I am Saho Emma, and I am with the Center for Biblical Formation with the Notre Dame Sion Sisters.
I am Claudia. I am also sister of Our Lady of Zion. I am Victoria from Egypt, but I am sister of Zion and I am living in Academy.
Sister Rose Teresa, sister of Zion. Thank you, everybody knows.
It's the Sisters of Zion.
No, you haven't finished.
I'm Ines, I'm not a sister. But a reverend of the German Protestant church, the Lutheran church, and I'm located on the Mount of Olives.
Oh,
I'm Steve, I've lived in Jerusalem for 15 years
oh,
and I'm a student. of art.
I'm Lisa. I have not lived in Jerusalem for 3 years. And I am also a student of art for 50 years.
Maybe
And student of art.
the two young ladies at that, please.
St. Silverberg, lived in Jerusalem for 10 years. Student of art, first time at the Grateful Gallery, and I'm very excited to be here.
I'm Rayette, born and raised in Jerusalem and came with us.
Well, Fiore, a Roman Catholic priest, Jesuit, been here for 3 years, teaching English and philosophy.
We'll come forward. We'll come forward.
Okay, well, I'm Eric Ross, I'm a Dominican friar and I live at the École Biblique.
I'm Olivier, I'm French and I'm Dominican and living at the École Biblique also and teaching Jewish literature.
Well, I'm Malcolm Lowe. The most important thing to know about me is that there are 2 L's in Malcolm. Apart from that, I've both taught and published in the 3 areas: Greek philosophy, New Testament, and Christian Jewish dialogue.
My name is Milena, I'm a Protestant German pastor at the German speaking congregation in the Old City, and I'm leading a study program at the Hebrew University for German theology.
Still joke.
I'm Sis from Notre Dame de Sion, teacher Valley.
Marcy Lang, I'm a Jewish teacher of Judaism and Christianity.
I'm Mary Rayburn. I'm a Sister of Our Lady of Zion from Australia, and I return to Australia on Monday. God willing.
I'm Geert Cohen Stewart. My first visit to the Rainbow was in 1970 or something like that. A member from 1982, originally from the Netherlands. And I just told our president that I wrote my thesis on the origins of the concept of Yetzirah.
Wow. So I do know most of you, but I'm Peter. I'm the secretary of the Rainbow Group and work in interfaith dialogue professionally.
You want the people maybe who are on Zoom to also?
No, we said explicitly the Zoom is a few of them.
Yes, in case everyone else doesn't know, those who are on Zoom, and it's about 4 or 5 people, will be silent participants. So the conversation will be just amongst us in the room, but we hope that you can hear us and see the presentation. For those who are here for the first time, we will have a presentation that will be about 35 or 40 minutes. Is that what you were told? I hope. Okay.
I wasn't, but it's fine.
More or less. We will have a coffee break and then a second convening for discussion, which Peter will introduce, but discussion, not only questions and answers. Our theme for the year has been evil and dealing with evil. And our guest speaker this evening, whom we're very, very happy to have, is Rabbi Professor Arthur Green. And let me tell you a little bit about him. He studied at Brandeis University, where he went through a crisis of faith and sought new approaches to Judaism. He subsequently earned a PhD, became a professor of Near Eastern and Judaic Studies. He was ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary of America as a conservative rabbi. I think he's gained some notoriety as having been among the founders of Chavurat Shalom, which was a unique Jewish community that wasn't exactly a synagogue in the Boston area, which was imitated and spread widely throughout North America. He subsequently became the president of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and after leading that for several years, founded, I believe, and led the non-denominational rabbinical school at Hebrew College, which returned him to Boston. He is also on the board, a member of the board of the
Elijah Board of World.
Elijah Board of World Religious Leaders. So a very accomplished scholar, author, teacher. We're truly honored to have you. Thank you for schlepping up from Tel Aviv. And thank you for agreeing to speak to us at Rainbow.
Thank you. It's very nice to be back at Notre Dame in Jerusalem. I was last in this building 65 years ago. When I first came to Israel in 1961, you could go up to the top of Notre Dame, pay 50 grush, and look across to see a bit of the wall of the old city. So that's my association with Notre Dame, and I haven't forgotten how exciting it was to see that bit of the old city wall. And it's good to be back after all these years. And of course, it's good to be here with all of you. And thank you so much, Petra, for the invitation. I'm here wearing two hats. Let me say that. I am a scholar of Jewish history of Jewish thought. My special field is Jewish mysticism, and especially the early generations of Hasidism. That's what I do my academic work on. What wasn't mentioned in the introduction is that I also spent a couple of decades at universities. I taught at the University of Pennsylvania and at Brandeis University. I lived in the university academic world, and I'm also a theologian, which is to say I think about these things, and I think about these things from a personal point of view. That's always been true of me. I am not a scholar who late in life decided to also write theology. From the beginning, pretty much, I have been involved in both of those enterprises, but I do understand them as two distinct worlds, and I will try to separate them tonight and speak first as a historian of Hasidism, and then a little bit about what I might have to say as well. In talking about the problem of evil, we first have to begin with some definitions. What do we mean by evil? What do we mean by it? We have to distinguish the problem of suffering from the problem of evil. Yes, we human beings suffer. We suffer physical pain. We suffer spiritual anguish. We suffer from dislocations, from losses. Today I got a notice from a professor at Haifa, whom I don't know, that a person I loved very much when I was in my early 20s has died. I haven't seen that person for 60 years, so it doesn't make any immediate difference, but suddenly you feel the pain. You feel the pain of a loss. All of that I do not consider evil. That's sad. That's painful. It's about suffering. It causes suffering. But I don't call it evil. I do not believe that either cancer or tsunamis are evil. They are part of the world in which we live. Evil to me means malicious, conscious causing of harm or pain to other human beings or other creatures in general, or malicious disregard of such pain, or hurting people for sport, for entertainment. Enjoying learning of such malice. Those are the things I consider to be evil. By the way, I don't know them in the animal kingdom. They're creations only of human beings. The things I consider evil. And it's real. And we have to contend with it. And we have to ask how it can be. If we are either monotheists or monists, which is to say everything comes out of the one, everything comes from one place, and we believe that one place is good and we worship it, then we have to ask, how can evil exist in the world? How can evil exist in the world means, how can evil exist in human beings? How is it that there is evil in human beings? Please notice that in the first chapter of Genesis, and it's my personal custom to recite the days of creation each day of the week, so I know them by heart in Hebrew. On the sixth day, it says that God created the animals and the creeping things, and God saw that it was good. Then God creates man, and after God creates man, it says God saw all that God had made, and it was good. There is no it was good after the creation of man. The Torah knows human beings too well to say, Vayar Elohim ki tov. God saw that it was good after God created human beings. We turn from the first chapter of Genesis to, of course, Isaiah 45, where God is Yotzer Or Uvrei Choshech, Oseh Shalom Uvrei Ra, creator of light and darkness, maker of peace, and creator of Ra. Of Ra. It's the opposite of Shalom because they're pairs. Or and Choshech, light and darkness go together, and Shalom Vira, Shalom and Ra go together. So it's the opposite of Shalom. Discord, evil. But God creates that too. And we know that already from Scripture. From there, I would go to the authors of Deuteronomy and Job. Deuteronomy gives us a very clear theology about good and evil. You should choose good and not evil. Choose goodness and life. Choose evil and death. And if you choose good, I will give you your wine and your corn and your oil and your rich fields and your fat flocks, all those things you want, all this worldly rewards, of course, for choosing the good. And if you choose evil, beware, because I can render terrible, terrible punishment. That what is it, 28th chapter of Deuteronomy? The end of Parashat Ki Tavo, where the descriptions of the pain that will rain down upon you if you do evil are just awful. They may be, in fact, memories of what sieges of cities were like and the terrible things that happened in the course of ancient sieges. And God will bring that upon you if you do Ra. And that's the answer of Deuteronomy. It's a very clear theology. The author of Job comes along and says, it ain't that way. There are good people who suffer. There's no reason why they should suffer. And if there's evil, maybe God is evil. Maybe there's evil in God. Because God lets this happen. If the author, presumably the author of the poem of Job, knew the story of Job, God's wager, then who is evil? And so the theology of Deuteronomy is completely overturned by the author of Job. Eventually, the author of Job says, I give in. He listens to Job 38. He listens to Job's speech. Where were you when I created the world? Where were you? We had created all these wonderful things that God talks about. Job never says, okay, Lord, you are right. He just says, I give in. I have to accept reality as it is. But there's no justification. There's no tziduk adin. There's no justification for God. That at the end of Job that I can see. It's just an acceptance of reality. I am indeed small. You got all the cards in this game, brother. Nothing I can do. So nichamti ala farvei, for I regret, and I will shut up. I think that's much of what we inherit from Scripture. I want to say the book of Job always reminds me of the figure of Cain. For me, Cain is the beginning of this problem. Here you are, the first human being to live outside of Eden, outside of the garden of protected childhood in Eden. And you have this great idea. You're so grateful for your existence, you're going to bring God an offering. And since you're a farmer, you bring God the best veggies you have. And then your brother says, hey, that's a good idea. I'm going to one-up you. I'm going to bring an offering too. But he's a shepherd, so he brings meat. Guess what? God likes barbecue. God is not a vegetarian. So Cain is furious. It was his idea. He can't do anything against God, so he kills his brother. Maybe not knowing what the word kill means, just picks up a stone and bashes on his brother's head and didn't know about death. But God calls Cain and says, "Where is your brother Abel? Your brother's blood calls to me." Which is to say, here we are out of Eden. We live in the real grown-up world. There ain't no justice, and you are totally responsible. Period. That's what it means to be out of Eden. I think Cain is the original existential hero, and not the last one in the Bible, the first one, but not the last one in the Bible. You have to deal with reality as it is, even though it's not fair, even though there is no good reason why one guy's prayers get listened to and the other guy's prayers don't. That's the way life is, and you are responsible. Seems to me that's much of what we have in Scripture, to put it in very brief, simplified terms. Remember, I'm going to talk about Hasidism tonight. Hasidism is a very, very late movement in the history of Judaism. It's a movement of the 18th century, which is to say it's about 2,600 years later than many of these texts I've been talking about now. And Judaism is cumulative, it builds up. If you come into classical Judaism at a great point, you have accepted all the prior layers of Jewish thought and teaching. It all comes upon you. So if you live in the 18th century and are a Hasidic Jew in Eastern Europe, you believe everything in the Torah, of course. You believe everything in the Nevi'im and Ketuvim. You believe everything the Rabbi said, and everything the medieval philosopher said, and everything the early Kabbalists said, and everything the later Kabbalists said. And if they contradict one another, and they do all the time, of course, that's your game. You try to find ways to show that they're not really contradictory because you believe them all. Of course, you have great freedom of reinterpretation. That's how Judaism works. Yes, everything is accepted from the past, and I have the right to reinterpret it quite dramatically, quite freely sometimes, quite radically, which is exactly what the Hasidic masters did. But it's a cumulative tradition. So we have to look for a minute. I will get to Hasidism, I promise. But we have to do this. We have to look for a minute at Rabbinic Judaism. The problems of suffering and the problems of evil. Again, those two distinct areas. Accepting suffering in love. Kabbalat Yisurim be'ahava. The notion of Yisurim shel ahava. You accept suffering because it's a way of expressing your love of God. And maybe God is giving you this suffering out of God's love. Maybe that's a gift you needed to receive. Sometimes they will say, God brings suffering to the righteous in this world to make their reward greater in the world to come. Whatever minor sins they might have had, they pay off in this world through suffering, so that they will then come to the world to come with a clean slate. Rabbinic Judaism accepted the idea of life after death and reward after death, which, of course, as you know, is not found in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible. It's only found suggested by one of Job's friends as one of the answers you might give to Job, and Job dismisses it. That's all there is. The rabbis accepted it, but always with a certain degree of ambivalence. Yes, there is such a thing as the world to come. Yes, you'll be rewarded, but better 1 hour of mitzvot and maasim tovim, mitzvot and good deeds in this world than the whole life of the world to come. Do not be like a person who serves the master for the sake of reward. Be like a master who serves not for the sake of reward. Pirkei Avot. So therefore, thinking about the reward in the world to come is not something you're supposed to be doing. Judaism and Christianity diverge quite a bit in that. I would say Christianity, in some ways, did succeed in conquering Rome with the promise of eternal life, with the reality of life eternal being so essential as Christianity developed. The Jews had it, but didn't quite like it, because you were supposed to be doing mitzvot because they were God's will, and you were devoted to God in love and awe. That's why you do the mitzvot. That you do the mitzvot because God is going to reward you with eternal life? No, 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 that's wrong. You're not supposed to be thinking about that. That's a distraction from the real religious task, which is the task of living the good life. Remember, salvation is not an issue in Jewish theology. There is a salvation of the people from galut, from exile. Because Judaism as a religion of a people, more than it's a religion of the individual, again, of course, a classic Jewish-Christian divergence, God is with us. God is with us in galut. That's the real problem. Wherever Israel were exiled, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, was exiled with them. God is always with us in galut, and God will redeem us at the end. An individual's life, yes, God is always with you, of course, in your suffering, but you don't need to be saved. You have lived as good a life as you have, or as bad a life as you have. And that's about it. In the Middle Ages, you got more of course, heaven and hell. I think partly Christian influence, where Jews were a minority in a surrounding Christian culture, but partly developed on their own too. And some took it more seriously than others. For the rabbis, evil is mostly about the Yetzer Hara, the evil in people. Everybody has both a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Ra, a good inclination and a bad inclination. The Yetzer Hara is with you from birth. Every person has a Yetzer Hara from birth. I would say, to me, that means unlimited desire to have your needs fulfilled. Like a child needs to be nourished and needs to be fed and needs to be loved. It's all about my needs. And therefore you can become selfish. That can become overwhelming if you just are thinking about your needs. And people are there, parents are there to satisfy my needs. That's a child with what will become a Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Tov enters, they say, at the time of maturation, 12, 13 years old. And the Yetzer Tov means something different. It means I have something to give. I have something to give. I have love to give. I don't just need love, I can give love, and that's discovering sexual maturation. And that's also discovering what it means, the beginning of what it means to be an adult member of society. I have something to give. I think that's how I understand the Yetzer Ra and Yetzer Tov. But they are certainly there. The person must struggle with evil. You must struggle to overcome your Yetzer Ra and subjugate it to the Yetzer Tov. And sometimes the world is seen as divided between tzaddikim or rishaim. Here, tzaddikim does not mean Hasidic masters and does not mean the great righteous people in the world. It's a forensic definition. There are people who are found innocent and people who are found guilty. People are weighed in the scale, and you could be tzaddik or rasha. It's that kind of use of the terms tzaddik and rasha. But the human being struggles with evil, and that is personal, but that also is collective. The Jewish people struggles with forces of evil. There are Risha'im, there are wicked people among the Jews, and nobody ever denied that, even though there are nice rabbinic dicta that say, V'amech kulam tzadikim, all your people are righteous. They knew very well that wasn't true. But there is also the wickedness of the nations, which Israel has suffered, and that, as history went on, became a greater and greater theme. I want to step back a moment and say something more general. In the Western tradition, scholars often say there are two ways of approaching the problem of evil: the Neoplatonic and the Gnostic. You've probably heard that somewhere before. Neoplatonism will say, evil is privation of the good. You are distanced from good. The way the Neoplatonic philosopher is distanced from the light. The light is far off. Therefore, we experience darkness. Darkness is the privation of light. You remember Plato's image of the cave, how you have to open it a little bit so a person can get used to the light from which they have been so alienated. That mashal, that parable, by the way, exists throughout medieval Jewish literature and is quoted by Hasidic masters, having no idea that it's Plato, of course. But they quote it from Maimonides or from somebody or from some other homiletic work in the Middle Ages. So evil is privation. Evil is you're deprived of goodness. But it's not real. It's only a lack. Goodness is real. That lack is just because you haven't had an opportunity to experience the good or to see the good. But if you did have that opportunity, you would not be evil. If you could see the light, if we could train you to come closer to the light, train your mind philosophically in this kind of devotional, mystical, philosophic world of Neoplatonic Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, then we would make you more aware of God's presence, and you would become less evil. You would become more good. That would bring you back to the goodness. Ha'ma'or shebatorah machziro lemutav is a phrase you see in late Midrashic literature. The light within the Torah will bring you back to goodness. If you could see the light, then you would find your way back to goodness. That is opposed to the Gnostic reality, the Gnostic approach to the problem of evil. Evil is real and dangerous and terrible and demonic. And evil created this physical world. This physical world is dominated by the forces of evil. That kind of blatant Gnosticism, of course, was denounced by various church councils, and the Gnostic Gospels were not made part of the New Testament canon. We know now from the work of Elaine Pagels and various other scholars that those Gnostic Gospels were very important in the early development of Christianity, and the expunging of them from what became Christian Orthodoxy was a very important formative move in the early history of Christianity. But that Gnostic spirit, it begins somehow in the edges of the Jewish and Christian worlds, probably mostly the influence of the Hellenistic mystery religions and maybe something of Zoroastrianism that has creeped in the Eastern Mediterranean world. That sense of dualism, that there is a real demonic force out there which has to be fought, is very powerful in Gnosticism. And it's usually described in mythic terms, the primordial serpent and all kinds of language like that, dragons and what have you. How do you do that in the context of monotheism? That was the danger of Gnostic Christianity. It threatened monotheism. The rabbis talk about something called people who believe in Shtei Rishuyot Bashamayim, who believe there are two domains in heaven. And anybody who believes in two domains in heaven is not part of the rabbinic community. That's one of the things for which you could be thrown out, for which you could not be part of the rabbinic world. If you could not say Hashem Echad, that God is one. If you said there are two ultimate domains in heaven, you were out. But the spirit of Gnosticism is very powerful, and it responds to real human needs. People don't want to say softly, no, if only I saw all that goodness, I'd be good. But people who understand that evil is a real force in the world. And so the Gnostic mythology, if not the scriptures of Gnosticism, survived underground for a long time in ways we don't quite understand. There are various Gnostic groups in Europe I'm sure you know the Bogomils and the Carthusians and so on. Not Carthusians. No. I'm sorry, Cathars. Yes, I'm confused. Cathars are our Gnostic group. Our Gnostic groups. That kind of Gnostic semi-monotheism reappears in Kabbalah in the 12th and 13th centuries. The Kabbalists insist that no, God is one, this is all part of the one, these are manifestations of the one, or these are bits of spiritual flotsam and jetsam that somehow escaped from divine control and then oppose God. Fallen angels, the myth of the fallen angels from the ancient world comes back and becomes very powerful. But early Kabbalah, especially certain Kabbalists, the Kabbalists of Castile and certain other forces within Kabbalah, the circle out of which the Zohar emerged, which is the great work of Kabbalah, of course, which was accepted as a kind of canonical work by Jews beginning in the 15th, 16th centuries. They are filled with vivid descriptions of the forces of evil. There is something called Sitra Achra, the other side. And that other side has 10 sfirot, just like the divine manifestation has, and it has princes and princesses of evil, male and female forces of evil, that do all kinds of terrible things to try to lead people astray, but also try to lead divine forces astray. There are passages in the Zohar that talks about the Shekhinah, the presence of the bride of God or the presence of God, captured, carried away, raped by the terrible serpents of evil. And when she is separated from her beloved spouse, from the male figure of the deity, the world is covered with evil, and she needs to be redeemed. And much of the work we do in doing our mitzvot and studying our Torah, because Judaism is about Torah and mitzvot, which I think are parallel, by the way, Torah and Torah study. This is just a side note. Torah study and observance of the mitzvot.
מוכן. אמרו לה.
I'm sorry, somebody on Zoom doesn't have their mute turned on, and we're having trouble. Please mute whoever it is. I'm sorry. Torah and mitzvot, Torah study, which is equal to all the rest of the mitzvot, and the observance of mitzvot, I think are parallel to faith and good works in Christianity. But it's very interesting to see that it's study rather than faith. It's a little different emphasis. It's not faith in the Torah, but it's engagement in study of the Torah, which makes Judaism such a very intellectualized tradition. Everybody's supposed to be a student. So the work we do for the Kabbalists, the classical Zohar Kabbalists, the work we do in our religious lives, our devotional work, Torah and mitzvot, are for the purpose of redeeming the Shekhinah from captivity, making her beautiful, bringing her to her marital canopy again, so she will be reunited with her divine spouse, and then the light will flow, the light which can also be water or fine olive oil or human seed. All that could flow into her, and she will then give bounty to the earth. That's how the system works in Kabbalah. You give your devotional energy to the Shekhinah, that makes her more beautiful and attractive to the Blessed Holy One, her spouse. She is able to rise up, enter into this bridal situation with him. The Midrash on Song of Songs is quoted in almost every page of the Zohar. They are lovers. She is then fructified by him, and that brings all the juices of rebirth and renewal down into the world in the form of blessing. That's essentially what Kabbalah is about, if you will, in a few sentences. Now we've come to Hasidism. Hasidism is a very late and highly simplified version of Kabbalah. It tries to bring Kabbalah to a wide audience who were mostly incapable of reading the Kabbalistic books. As it happened, generation after generation, new Kabbalists tried to add more and more complexity to the system, more and more levels of different worlds, of how different portions of the divine universe operated. Kabbalah became a victim of the same thing that Halacha became a victim of. It's called pilpul, which means overly complex argumentation, often to demonstrate how brilliant you are.
Sophistry.
Yes, what's the word?
Sophistry.
Sophistry, yes. Pilpul is something like sophistry. Pilpul became very extensive from the late Middle Ages until the early modern period in Judaism. And it destroyed much of Talmudic studies, although you wouldn't know it today, because there are people in this city who study all of those pilpulistic works very avidly and seem to understand them, which I couldn't imagine. And the same thing happened to Kabbalah. So Hasidism is a radical simplification. The Baal Shem Tov, the person around whom Hasidism coagulated, he didn't found the movement, but he was the person around whom the movement was designed. He was a religious revolutionary. He was a very interesting person. Came from the margins of Jewish society, was not highly learned in traditional ways, was a charismatic healer. He was originally a folk healer, a Baal Shem. The term Baal Shem, master of the name, means a folk healer, somebody who could heal people's illnesses, whether by magical names, by formulae of prayer, or by herbs he picked up in the wilderness along the way. And these Jewish healers and the folk healers on the other side of the street, meaning Christian folk healers, were very much in touch with one another and influenced one another, shared recipes before there were pharmacies. These people were in the pharmacy business in some ways. But he was also a spiritual healer. He was one who took this career of healing and turned it into a career of spiritual healing. His spiritual healing was largely about two things. Stop punishing yourself. Stop being overburdened by sin. God wants you to be happy. The purpose of Torah is to serve God in joy. If you sin, regret it and go on and serve God in joy again. And do not obsess about it. More than that, he asked the question, what would Judaism be like if we really took seriously the whole earth is filled with God's glory? There is no place where the Shekhinah is not present. The whole earth is filled with God's glory. We say that every day in our Kedusha, which is parallel to the Sanctus, of course. So we say it every day, holy, 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 but what if we took it seriously? God is everywhere. We are living inside God. We are living inside the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah fills us and surrounds us. The Shekhinah is the human heart and is the heart of the universe. If we took that message really seriously, how would it transform our lives? He took that you can find formulae like that in earlier Kabbalistic works, but he was ready to chuck most of the rest of it for that simple, you are always living in the presence of God. He was a terribly optimistic person about the human being. He really believed people could grow and people could change. And so the Baal Shem Tov took this simplified Kabbalistic liturgy and shifted it back into a new kind of Neoplatonic place, which is to say, all of evil has some spark of goodness in it, or else it wouldn't exist. Since everything exists only because of the sparks of divine energy that give it life. God wouldn't have it exist if God didn't want it somehow. So therefore, what you have to do in approaching everything including your own Yetzer Hara, including your own temptations, including your own sexuality, which he hints about a lot, talks about a lot. He was a person who was not afraid to deal with it. He says in one of his little one-line comments, which we have so many of, why do Jews pray and not get redeemed? He says, because they do not spend enough time on Ahava Rabbah. Ahava Rabbah is a prayer declaring God's great love. And we say it right before the Shema. The Shema is the great moment of Jewish liturgy, of course, where you proclaim God to be one. And for the Hasid, everything is one. There is only one. The Shema is the great monistic cry of Hasidic Judaism. There is only one. Right before that, you say this prayer, Ahava Rabbah, with great love have you loved us. You have given us your Torah and love and so on. He says, Jews aren't saved because they don't spend enough time saying Ahava Rabbah, which is like the kisses before intercourse. In other words, you have to prepare yourself spiritually to be really ready for and really open to that great moment of saying the Shema. And that's like making love. Jews have no interest, by the way, in chastity and virginity, as you know. Chastity in a certain sense, but certainly not in abstinence. And so it was taken for granted that was a proper metaphor for talking about what it means to love God and what it means to receive God's love before you declare God to be one. So if you live in that kind of world, then what you have to teach people to do is to separate good from evil, to take the evil out of evil, and to restore it to its goodness. Everything that exists has divine presence in it, or it wouldn't exist. There is evil in it, yes, and that evil is real, but that evil is somehow a distortion of God's intent in creating it. Sometimes this is associated with quasi-magical, mystical things like reversing the letters, taking the word nega, affliction, and reversing the letters and making it O negative becomes joy. Things like that. Because God created the world through letters, but the letters have gotten mixed up in the course of evil because the burden of human sin has caused the letters to get confused. So you have to straighten them out and make sure that the world becomes the world that God intended to create. I have a couple of texts I wanted to read with you, but I don't think we have time. So I'm going to have to skip the text, but I'm going to read it.
We could look at them after the break.
We could look at them after the break? Okay, good. Because I always like to teach text, but I talk too much. So that's what happens. So that's what Hasidism does. The problem of evil is a problem of your evil, your Yetzer Hara, and what you have to do about it. And what you have to do about it is separate the strands, separate the things that have gotten confused. There's a line a text I just saw this week. There's a line in the laws of Shabbat in the Talmud about how you loosen the strings and the bags fall down. It's about whether you're allowed to carry things on a donkey's back on the Sabbath. It's ridiculous and complicated. But you loosen the strings. The Hasidic reading takes to be you separate things out, you separate the strands, and then the sacks fall down. The sacks are the klipot, are the husks that are hiding the goodness. So you have to learn to reveal. You have to learn to reveal the presence of the good, even within evil. And they believe that can be done. And that's what the human being is about. The Torah is a guidebook to doing that. And they learn to read the whole of Torah as a guidebook for discovering that God is present everywhere and evil can be uplifted. Everything can be uplifted and transformed into good. That is the essential Hasidic message on this question. Now let's take a quick breath and say something contemporary with my other hat. I'm a post-Holocaust Jew. And this is very hard. To try to live the Hasidic way of teaching about this is very, very hard for a post-Holocaust Jew. Because we have encountered evil in such a massive, incredible, overwhelming way that all this sounds, who are you kidding? Sounds a little trivial. And even though I believe in it, I believe that the Baal Shem Tov is right in this attitude toward evil. And it's the way I try to live. I also have a big pack on my back that says, come on. I grew up in the American Jewish community in the 1950s and 1960s. And whenever you began a question about any conversation that talked about religion, where was God in 1944? End of conversation. And so much atheism became very deeply embedded in American Jews because of that, because of where was God in 1944? End of conversation. And so this is not easy. We also live in a scientific world. I believe that the story of evolution is a narrative that we have, in which we have to find sparks of holiness. We have to understand evolution as a sacred narrative. It's the tale of how God brought us to this place. And that means much of who we are as human beings comes from that tale of evolution. We grew out of species that constantly fought each other to survive. The survival of the fittest is a very real description of evolution, where everything is divided between predators and prey. We are the product of this great miracle, this unbelievable miracle, that one-celled animals under the sea eventually learned how to crawl up onto dry land and live on dry land, and some of them learned how to take nourishment out of the soil of dry land and became plants, and other descendants of that same one-celled creature began to learn how to derive nourishment from eating those plants. And then other creatures, also descendants of that same one-celled creature, learned that they had to get their nourishment by eating other animals, by eating other living beings that also walked around, who were smaller than them. That happened in the sea, of course, among fish, and it happened on dry land. And we are descendants of those creatures. We are descendants of an evolutionary process that was a very tough world. And we developed a lot of our toughness to survive in that tough world. If I have a question I address to God about the origins of evil, it is why it had to be that way, why evolution had to happen in that competitive, aggressive, vicious way. Why couldn't God have brought us about in a more peaceful way? Now we are the descendants of lions and wolves, but we were also the descendants of ants and bees, remember. Ants and bees who could not exist for a moment if they did not cooperate with one another on a large scale. And human society in some ways is very much like the societies of ants and bees, because we rule this world because we have learned to communicate and cooperate. So part of my question of evil is a sort of biological, evolutionary, religious question all at once. How can we make good choices within our evolutionary legacy to be more collaborative and less aggressive and competitive? I see some of this played out in capitalism and socialism. We see the aggressiveness of the people who are running our country my country right now, and their bitter opposition to anything that might be about cooperation and collaboration and communication on a deeper level. And I see it getting worse and worse, not better. And I'm frightened. I think there are real forces of evil in the world, and some of them have tremendous political and military power. Forces of evil, again, that I define as those who maliciously, willingly do harm to others, or ignore, or rejoice at malicious harm done to others. I think they are ruling an awful lot of our world these days, and it's terrifying. I believe we do have to stand up to them, call them out, use the prophetic voice that both our traditions have so much of. And we have to live like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who you remember went out to the Roman general and said, "Give me Yavne and its scholars." Sometimes all we can do in times of evil is get a little light going, nourish it, and keep it going while we pass through very dark periods and very dark times. I am still a believer. I am still a believer that we are going somewhere good. And I believe that evolution has a teleology to it. I disagree with a great biologist at Harvard, Stephen Jay Gould, who said, no, evolution is absolutely random. It has no meaning, it has no purpose, it has no teleology. And I say to him, that's not a biologist's claim. That's a philosophical, theological claim. So I think we still are going somewhere. I still believe ultimately in the vision of the whole earth will be filled with knowledge of Yud Hey Vav Hey, of the one, as the waters fill the sea. And I think we have to contribute to that by learning to redeem ourselves from the evil within us, to face it, and to try to turn it into good, to try to do what the Hasidic masters and earlier teachers taught us to do. And we will live through it and see that redemption at some time long beyond my life, and hopefully not too long beyond yours. Thank you for listening.
And then I will start the share again.
But you can begin.
Yes.
Let me first say that my old friend Yakub from Olam Katan Bookstore is here. He had some books of mine, some of them in Hebrew. I don't know how many of you read Hebrew, well enough to read them in Hebrew, but some other books that he'll be selling after this. So, we have two texts here. I'm going to do The Children Struggled Within Her. This, of course, is Rebecca in Genesis. You all know the story, that Isaac prays for her, and she becomes pregnant, and she feels these two twins fighting within her, struggling within her. And she said, in that case, why am I? This is a text from a book called Degel Machane Ephraim. The Degel Machane Ephraim is by Rabbi Ephraim of the town of Stelikov. He was the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. And he is one of the two most important sources for teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov did not write books. He did not believe in writing. He was purely an oral teacher. There's a story told in the legends about him that one day he had a dream, and he sees a demon in the dream. And the demon is walking around and around him, waving a book in the air. He says to the demon, "What's that book?" And the demon says, "That's your book, you wrote it." And he understood somebody had been writing down his teachings. So he called all the students together and says, "Show me the notebook." And the student brought it to him trembling and said, "I just wanted to preserve your words." He sat and read it from cover to cover and said, "There's not a single word here I said." Because it can't be captured in writing. But the Degel, it was his grandson. He was 15 years old, I think, when the Baal Shem Tov died. So we learned a lot from him, and he is a very faithful recorder of his teaching. We may say the Torah is hinting at a moral lesson here. It is known that the human has two inclinations, one good and one evil. Humans were created for the purpose of attempting to make the evil urge over into good. This means serving Blessed Havaya in all matters deriving from the evil inclination. Everything you have within you that derives from the evil inclination has to be turned around and become a vehicle for serving God. You will have more energy in serving God if you use that great energy, which we know is there in your desire for evil things. That energy is divine energy. It has to be retooled, resurfaced. Thus our sages taught who is wise. Now he distorts the rabbinic text here. Who is wise? One who learns from every person. The Mishnah says in Avot, in Pirkei Avot. But he says not mi ezu chacham halomed mikol adam, but ezu chacham halomed mikol ha'adam. He puts a hey in there, so he makes it one who is wise, one who learns from the whole person. A very interesting change, very daring change to just add one letter and change the meaning of a text. In the books of the Holy Rabbi of Polonoi, he was the other main source for the Baal Shem Tov's teachings, even from the evil urge. We are to learn from the whole person, even from the evil urge. The evil urge has something to offer us, something to teach us. It is known that, Ecclesiastes, God made one thing opposite the other. Things correspond to one another. This means there are people who transform their good urge into evil, God forbid. But when God graciously makes them aware of their useless deeds, they become astonished at themselves. How might they have been able to serve Havaya where the good urge was strong? But now even it is turned to evil. And then they ask, as Rebecca does, why have I come into this world? Im ken lama za'anuchi. That's a very powerful line in Genesis. Lama za'anuchi. Why am I? Why does this self exist? But Anuchi, of course, always has the echoes of Anuchi, the beginning of the Ten Commandments. That Anuchi. Why have I come into this world and I've accomplished nothing of value and even wrought evil by my deeds? Once coming to this awareness, you begin to investigate and seek out the nature of true divine service. Then Havaya responds to you by means of a messenger, a good and trusted friend. The messenger informs you there's no surprise here because you have not truly worshipped the Creator. You have not ever truly worshipped the Creator. What you sometimes thought was worship with awe and love was in fact a lie, the result of pride. Your efforts to serve had wrought no results because you had not yet made a distinction or separation of evil from good. You can't begin to worship until you can make that separation. This is the main goal, to be separated from evil and turn it into good. As in, and this is a verse well known, we recited in the Shabbat morning service, Sur me'ra v'aseh tov, bakesh shalom v'rafeu. Sur me'ra v'aseh tov means turn from evil and do good, or make good. This means, he says, to remove the evil from within evil and make it all into good. Lahasir, he reads sur as lehasir, to remove. Rather than turning from evil, it's remove from evil. Remove the evil and make it into good. Then the evil urge will be subjugated to the holy, and it will be possible to serve Blessed Havaya, even in matters that derive from the side of the evil urge. So that's the essential Hasidic teaching on this subject. Everything can be uplifted, and you have to be in the uplifting business. We don't have time. We have the text. I think we'll leave it, but you'll have a chance to read it because it ties this to the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Let me just say very briefly. There's a Kabbalistic text in the Middle Ages, Sodei Sadat, Gershom Scholem published it, manuscript. It says the reason Adam was expelled from the garden was not because he ate of the tree of knowledge, but because he separated the tree of knowledge from the tree of life. He took the tree of knowledge, because he separated the tree of knowledge, from the tree of life. He took of the tree of knowledge without the tree of life. That then gets from this text copied into the Zohar and disappears in Jewish literature as far as I know, but it reappears in this man, the Degel. He says the same thing, that the real sin of Eden separated the two trees. As one who lived in a Western academy for many years, I can tell you it's very true. And part of our problem in life is the separation of the tree of knowledge from the tree of life. Nobody goes to university. I have a granddaughter now applying to university. She cannot say on her application, I am going to the university to understand life or to become wise. We have separated the trees. Our academic life is not about wisdom. Maybe you can still learn wisdom in a Benedictine monastery if you stay there for many years. I'm sorry if I'm offending another order. Maybe you can learn wisdom in a Zen monastery if you stay there for many years. But universities are not a place to go to attain wisdom. So the separation of the trees and then bringing the trees, how do we reunite the trees? How does Torah reunite the trees and bring them back into harmony so that the tree of good and evil becomes the tree of good and not the tree of evil? That's this text and other things he has to say.